We don't think of Art Deco food as much as we think of fashion, music, or architecture of the Art Deco era. Once the dishes are washed, the meal digested, and the smells faded from the house, food is gone forever. Yet flavors come in and out of vogue with as much fanfare as colors, lines, and patterns. My name is Kristen Caven, or for the purposes of tonight's lecture about Deco housewives, Mrs. David Caven, and I love vintage cookbooks. Tonight I will share with you how I got interested in vintage cookbooks. I will introduce you to some of my favorites. I will talk about changes in the world at the time these books were printed and how this affected cooking. But first, if I know my audience, I know most of you either have a perfect deco kitchen or wish you had one. So we're going to start with a little test. A perfect deco kitchen has Bakelite drawer pulls, ziggurats on the kick plates, statuettes of chickens, an adorable set of canisters that the whole room could have been designed around. So what's still missing? Is it a Hamilton Beach retro blender? A practically authentic KitchenAid mixer? An enameled toaster for the table? No, of course. In contrast to the smooth gleaming surfaces of pretty sinks and stoves, a textured book with decollage pages and musty paper smells can really add life to any kitchen. And smells and flavors too, if you actually use them to cook. The kitchen is a place where you nourish body and soul and comfort foods. Whether it's cream of wheat or creme brulee, recipes provide touch points that connect generations of a family. So I believe everyone should have at least one vintage cookbook. And if you're lucky, you have ones your family has enjoyed over the years. Now, when I sit down and read a vintage cookbook, I enjoy an unusual interplay of emotional responses. I may feel charmed and or delighted by the curious sounding recipes, horrified by the disgusting sounding foods and photos, curious about the differences between the time it came from and my own, or inspired by the creativity and or dedication of the cooks who invented and used these recipes. We will be experiencing all those feelings together tonight, and I hope you will come to appreciate your own cookbooks in a whole new way. I got interested in antique food when my girlfriends gave me funny bridal shower books. Collections of advertisements and recipes poke fun at hungry men easily seduced by odd sugary treats like coconut jelly balls, 7-Up cake, bird cake, and hyper housewives eager for information on utterly banal subjects. My friends all inspired me as well with their lovely deco kitchens and aprons and casseroles. 1997 was a big year for me. I retired from my bathing beauty career to become a homeowner and mother, beginning my career as the perfect deco housewife. But seriously, real housewives did not all look like the wasp-waisted, lipsticked women shown in advertisements any more than today's normal women do. Take my size 16 grandmother, for example. She and my grandfather were German immigrants. He married her because he needed a cook. Back then, though, that wasn't so weird. The way to a man's heart, you know. And this is what she cooked. Grandma raised 5 kids, but kept them all out of the kitchen. Funny story my dad tells. The first morning they woke up together married. He says my mom popped out of bed and put on her little robe and said, "Good morning, honey." She kissed him on the cheek and said, "What would you like for breakfast?" And he thought, wow, this is great. How about a boiled egg? And she smiled and said, all right. And she left the room. And then he heard all this clanging and banging and water running and silence and then more banging and clanging. And about an hour later, she comes back in the room and goes, "Honey, how do you boil an egg?" My grandmother, the cook, had served her but never taught her. He went out and got her this cookbook, which I also received from him along with that wonderful story for my bridal shower. How to boil an egg. Use
1 pint water for each egg up to 6 eggs, 1/2 pint for each additional egg, and use a small deep saucepan so that the water will cover the eggs. Bring the water to the boiling point in a vessel that can be covered closely. Put the eggs in at once. Cover, set off the fire, and let stand in a warm place for 4 to 6 minutes, depending on consistency desired. In this way, the eggs will be cooked equally well in every part.
Oh, I love this excellent example of the chatty voice you find in these cookbooks, helpful and sincere. Soon I was reading to hear this quaint, comforting advisory voice speaking through helpful photos. And then I became enchanted with the recipes, some of them sounding like things aliens would cook, some of them that made me laugh out loud. So this lecture is about the mainstream cooking Bibles of the Art Deco era. Although there are many, many fun ways to collect cookbooks. For example, single themed foods, apples, fondue, cooking with Dr. Pepper, rose recipes, let's see, books from clubs, Phi Beta Chi. This one is from the Beverly Hills Social Club. Jell-O cookbooks, that's my favorite. General cookbooks were devoured, pardon the pun, by Deco housewives who craved information about domestic science, domestic capital science, in those changing times. By the way, did you notice that I'm changing different aprons and I'm also just changing different kitchens? So thank you to all my friends who shared your kitchens and aprons with me. So here are the favorites from my collection. The Modern Family Cookbook, 1942. The American Women's Cookbook, 1938, which you've already met. And the Modern Priscilla Cookbook, 1929. I love each of these books for their unique personalities. The Modern Family Cookbook was a bestseller through the 1960s. It's just got this adorable cover, and don't you think that might be actual harlequin? Ingredients are listed in red. There's cute little illustrations heading every main chapter. All menus are planned to measure up to the U.S. government's basic 7 food groups. Modern Priscilla, perhaps my most collectible, but alas my most tattered, which was a gift for subscribers to Modern Priscilla, a popular magazine from the late 1800s to the 1930s. American Women's was also the product of a fashion magazine that enjoyed a similar lifespan. Delineator was edited by the Delineator Institute, which created the Delineator Cookbook, from which American Women's Cookbook was originally adapted in 1939. The Delineator Institute became the Culinary Arts Institute of Chicago, which was a cookbook publishing powerhouse throughout the century. Editor Ruth Berolsheimer was incredibly prolific, editing the very popular Prudence Penny's Regional Cookbook, written by Leona A. Malik. This was America's first popular collection of multi-ethnic cooking, and hundreds of other books and pamphlets on every imaginable cooking subject. Everyone in this room probably grew up with one or more of these in their kitchen. First published in 1996, Fannie Farmer laid the groundwork for domestic science with specific, not approximate measurements. But hers was already an old-fashioned name by the time our modern homemaker set her Deco kitchen up. Betty Crocker was a fictional character created by General Mills in 1921 to answer letters. She was so popular they created a face for her in 1936, but her first book was not published until 1950. Irma Rombauer, however, was a real person who in 1931 self-published the gender-neutral Joy of Cooking, which has vanquished all the rest. I can't list celebrity chefs of the era without mentioning the literary light MFK Fisher, a glamorous and celebrated culinary writer of numerous books about the deep pleasures of eating. Her 27 books had clever titles such as Serve It Forth, Consider the Oyster, How to Cook a Wolf, The Gastronomical Me. Should you be so lucky as to have a first edition of any of these books on your heirloom shelf, it means you had a literary and sophisticated grandmother, and you also have a very, very valuable book on your hands. Essays in her book, How to Cook a Wolf, have titles like these that indicate the emotional uncertainty and tension of this golden age. The Art Deco era includes the years between the world wars, but as tastes, flavors, and eating habits change slowly, You'll find common ground in all cookbooks from the 20s through the 50s. These great collectible cookbooks were even published through the 1960s without losing their unique feel or flavor. Here are some of the many forces of change. Technology was advancing at speeds never known before in history. The Great Depression from 1929 to 1945 shook up the economy, mixing up the class system, forcing everyone to rethink money and value. The culture was becoming more and more commercial. The awfulness of war inspired a longing for social well-being, and design was a big part of that. Good design makes you feel good. Art Deco, the first international design movement, grew from the evolutionary yearning for a multicultural unity beyond colonization and dominion. Inspired by the arts of Africa, Asia, and Mesoamerica, Art Deco design influenced everything, every level of architecture to trains to appliances. All of these things meant change in the kitchen. Technology. Science was the thrill ride of the 20th century. Penicillin and vaccines were saving lives. Pesticides and fertilizers were new ideas that promised abundance and hope. Nutrition was science too, and every homemaker was excited to be part of the very friendly advancement of science. High-tech ovens, refrigerators, electric toasters, the electric pig, and waffle irons. 3 guesses what an electric pig is. In the 1920s, only a few people had these appliances. By the 1950s, practically everyone did. Time and your oven await the occasion and the man. Hot point. These books all have chapters on time management because home economics were seen as a science just for women. There are chapters on managing a kitchen, arranging a kitchen, and other helpful guidance on things like tin cans and their contents, freezing foods, canning foods, the diet pattern, school lunches, casserole and oven cookery, foods for invalids, and just plain useful facts about foods, uses of stale bread, how to get cooperation from your family, how to care for fats, entertaining without a maid, there it is again, and the problem of the formal meal. Now, as you might guess, those two things are connected. Many women can manage almost any form of entertainment without the help of a maid. For most, however, there are distinct limits to what should be attempted for pleasant and dignified results. The disappearance of the dining room and the substitution of a bay or alcove in the living room has increased the ease of servantless entertaining at the table. Many small pieces of furniture are especially designed to add to the efficiency of the hostess and the comfort of her guests, such as the drop leaf, gate leg, and butterfly tables, double-decked tea carts, muffin stands, and butler's trays. So you see the importance of architecture and interior design. You can actually replace your maid with a tea cart, or a muffin stand, I suppose. It's much less expensive, and money is tight. Let's take a little detour here to talk about maids and cooks. My great-aunt, Tante Sophie, worked as a domestic servant from the time she arrived off the boat in 1929 until she retired. Supporting herself, she didn't have to marry, and when she died, she bequeathed me her pearls, her silver, and some cute accessories. I found her own cookbooks. This is in German and very difficult to read, but it's full of wonderful recipes for cakes. Christmas things. Christmas is from Germany. And meats, color photos, and this page is really cool. Mushrooms. Plus, actual positions, hand positions, and apron wearing for good cooks. This is her actual diary, and it's full of German Schreibschrift, which I can't read, but someday I'm going to get these recipes translated by someone who can. Now think about what these general cookbooks are doing. They're empowering women to do their own cooking. They are putting the knowledge of food preparation in the hands of readers, when formerly it was all in the hands of servants. What I'm saying here is a large portion of the recipes in these mainstream cookbooks were written by maids. And a large portion of the maids were African Americans, just a few decades beyond emancipation. Another thing not listed here, because it was something the national conversation avoided, was racism, of course. After the hope of the Harlem Renaissance, Jim Crow laws worked to slowly chip away at the rights of people from unslaved families. Concurrently, a few black change agents found their rightful place in the world, and correct popular opinion encouraged and embraced their advancement. But this was not the case in all American homes, in spite of shared dining and dress styles. The next slides are from a book called The Jemima Code, 2 Centuries of African American Cookbooks by Toni Tipton Martin. I'm going to share some racist imagery, so here's a trigger warning for those who might feel uncomfortable exploring this hidden history. But bear with me, it's interesting and important. These 3 mammy cookbooks, quote unquote, tell the deeper story about the era and what Tipton Martin calls the frustration felt by a growing number of white employers who found it impossible to separate their contempt for black servants from their dependence on them. Aunt Caroline's Dixieland recipes were, quote, drawn from the treasured memories of Aunt Caroline Pickett, a famous old Virginia cook. The pinch of this and just a smacker of that, so wonderfully and mysteriously combined by the culinary masters of the Southland, have been carefully and scientifically analyzed and recorded in this volume. But it may get a caricature of ethnic dishes made with so-called poverty foods and named to emphasize their blackness. Mammy's graham muffins, Aunt Caroline's cornbread, Uncle Remus mint julep, and pickaninny cookies. Now remember modern Priscilla? Meet Aunt Priscilla, who had her own cooking column in the Baltimore Sun, publishing traditional Southern recipes in an exaggerated slave dialect. But guess what? She was actually a white woman. Eleanor Purcell, performing a sort of culinary minstrelsy, if you will. But Tipton Martin points out, this book broke with the long tradition of simply taking and publishing African American recipes without giving black cooks credit. And despite the cover and title, Catherine Bell avoids insulting her mammy, quote unquote, Sally Miller, in this 1927 self-published cookbook. In fact, she may have unwittingly made the case for intellectual property rights for her admired and accomplished cook. But long before Aunt Jemima herself was released from the image of a house servant, given pearls and a kitchen of her own, black cooks freed themselves. Here are some super collectibles. In 1911, Rufus Estes, the master chef for the Pullman Railroad Car Company, detailed his personal success story in Good Things to Eat as suggested by Rufus, the first recipe book by a black chef for black cooks. Now look at how cute that sophisticated little icon is. 1936's Eliza's Cookbook, Favorite Recipes Compiled by the Negro Culinary Art Club of Los Angeles, boasts about their middle-class lifestyle, Tipton Martin says. They wanted people to know that they didn't function in that residue of slavery. And this book, just the tattered cover of it really, brings a fresh breath of post-war air. Written by Frida DeKnight, the first black American food editor for Ebony, a new magazine that focused on African American culture, made it her mission to show that African American cooks in history were resourceful and clever culinary innovators whose talents went above and beyond, quote, peasant food. This cookbook includes more than 1,000 tips, recipes, and menus from black chefs, caterers, domestic cooks, and housewives, from unknowns to celebrities, to dispel white misconceptions and encourage African Americans to join the cooking industry. Interestingly, she later became the brand ambassador for Carnation Evaporated Milk, even though her cookbook eschewed the trendy processed convenience foods of the era that other cookbooks promoted. Do you remember that cutting moment in The Women when Crystal Allen wheedles Stephen into coming over for dinner? Then she drops the sweet act when she hangs up the phone and says she's going to hire a girl to do the cooking, and it will be dark in the kitchen so Stephen won't see her. And that's how you know how she's evil, because she's clearly a racist bigot. But did you ever notice how Mary Haynes' service were all white and the day staff were all white? Think about that. And now think about how black domestics dominated the world of food preparation. If you don't know this person, I'd like you to meet Zephyr Wright, the personal chef for President Lyndon Johnson, and an African-American civil rights activist. This was the Bible for domestic servants, released in 1939, the same year as the women. Sarah Helen B. Tolliver Muhammad was a black businesswoman in Nebraska who studied at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris in 1927 and is credited with bringing formal European-style cooking to African-American women for use in their homes and workplaces. Like barrel timers, she ran an institute and taught about recipes as well as doing the job of helping white women keep up their appearances of being in control of something. That's why formal meals were easy. With a maid. Less money, good design, technology, changing culture. Hard to tell which was the cart and which was the horse, but no matter which, household dynamics were changing and the tasks of homemaking were falling more and more on one person. This was a time of very conscious departure from Victorian values. At one time, it was the custom to serve long and elaborate dinners having many courses and much repetition of type foods. Gradually, the realization has grown that elaborate meals are not justified from any point of view, social, physiological, or economic, and that even the most formal meal must follow the rules of health. The next few pages are all about formal meals.
We have it every day. We sing this song, it will make us strong, and it makes us shout, hooray! It's good for growing babies and grown-ups to eat. For all the family's breakfast, you can see cream of wheat.
Advertising pamphlets, by the way, are as much fun to collect as cookbooks, if not more so, and much more practical space-wise if you don't have a deco kitchen of your own, or if that shelf space is already filled with mixers and toastalators. Which brings me to another category of collectibles. You often find clippings stuck in old cookbooks. Which brings us to a very important phenomenon of the era. We're talking about, yes, victory gardens. The kitchen was a political place between 1942 and 1946 when food and many other supplies were rationed so World War II soldiers could have what they needed. Each person was allotted 12 to 16 points per week, and there were two types of rations. Red, for all meats, butter, fat, and oils, and with some exceptions cheese. And blue, for canned bottles and frozen fruits and veggies, juices and dry beans, and processed foods such as soups, baby food, and ketchup. More kitchen fat means more glycerin to make bombs and bullets.
Waste kitchen fats. Certainly nothing to us, but they're a vital ingredient in the manufacture of high explosives. That's the stuff that's rocking our enemies right now, fore and aft. So keep rendering the fat, pouring it into smooth-edged cans, and bringing it to your butcher. To waste fat is unforgivable. To waste anything is setting a horrible example.
Shall we take this pledge together? Ready? I pay no more than top legal prices. I accept no ration goods without giving up ration stamps. Now, as I researched this, I started thinking about peace bonds. We could bring back all this great artwork, fund the Department of Peace, Peace Corps, something. We could ration foreign oil and stop global warming. I could actually do a whole lecture on tableware, from ubiquitous and affordable Fiesta ware to the lovely tinted depression glass you could buy at dime stores without breaking the bank. So here I've set our table with my cheerful, informal Lou Ray. Although it would be tremendously fun to analyze a bridge luncheon or even an elaborate picnic, this pattern is also perfect for a semi-formal 8-course dinner. Oh, what menu should we choose? Our cookbooks offer selections for seasonal dinners, simple dinners, dinners without meat, special occasion dinners, holiday dinners, wedding dinners, company dinners, Sunday night suppers, bridge suppers, or suppers for 100, because that comes up a lot. So let's eat. Every supper should start with cocktails, but sorry, if you want that kind of cocktail, you'll have to find another kind of book. The kinds of cocktails you'll find in a general cookbook of the era are this kind. The selection and preparation of ingredients is most important if the cup is to be one of distinction, instead of the hackneyed, uninteresting mixture which too often appears as a first course. Modern Priscilla. La-di-da. But what a wealth of recipes! You'll find cocktails made of fruit, seafood, and vegetables, including some rather curious recipes. The Miscellaneous Recipes chapter of the Modern Family Cookbook includes sections on rendering fat, plumping raisins, carrot sticks, larding meat, and the importance of pot liquor. If any of the cooking water or, quote, pot liquor must be poured off after cooking vegetables, save it in a covered jar in the refrigerator until enough has accumulated to make appetizer cocktails for the family. A combination of several such pot liquors is especially desirable. Add some tomato juice or sauerkraut juice if desired, season to suit taste, and serve ice cold. And, of course, garnish the heck out of it. This cocktail, to me, embodies the three main principles of the Deco diet. Squeeze every ounce of nutrition out of your food, stretch the shopping dollar, and presentation is everything. These, by the way, are cream cheese celery pinwheels. Stay tuned for more about cream cheese. From cocktails to canapes, there are many ways to whet the appetite. Without the crutch of store-bought cheese and crackers, appetizers were highly creative. The pictures maybe even more so than the actual recipes. Please help yourself to some traditional treats. Variety is not only the spice, but the very life of a tray of canapes, hors d'oeuvres, or appetizers. My son calls these horrors diverse. Stuffed celery, olives in blankets, sardine toast. Now, if you're a farm girl in the city, you might make cream cheese balls rolled in chipped beef. A rich gal could make cream cheese balls rolled in caviar. According to every cookbook I've read, the appetizer course was merging with the salad course all over the country. Because salad then meant something very different than it does now. Lettuce was more of an attractive plate liner than the food group it is today. Cooks combined foods that just don't sound right together to the modern ear. Pimento was as ubiquitous then as nuts and dried cranberries are now, and you could even make a salad in the freezer. This recipe is found in many, many cookbooks and pamphlets and celebrates the arrival of the kitchen freezer. Gelatin, not official Jell-O, which had a hard time at first establishing itself as quick packaged food since making gelatin is so darn easy. I once did an oral history of some Mills College alumni who had attended in the 1930s. They all talked about smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, and playing bridge, which was what all women in every sorority did, and those at women's colleges as well. But at Mills, they all spoke of their passion for frozen fruit salad from Jimmy's, which was a restaurant near the college that they could walk to. Well, I was a bit floored when someone posted this ad from the 1920s on a Mills Facebook page. The fudge thing is a reference to Vassar College, another women's college on the East Coast, which popularized fudge in the 1920s. So of course Oakland had to throw down. Watch for my forthcoming lecture, Who is Jimmy and Why Does He Shiver? And my protest soapbox, Mills Girls Providing Our Own Dainties Since 1870. Discussion around this image brought alumni together to bring some shivering Jimmy to students who were living through a nightmare. It became a symbol, for a moment there, of resistance to the Mills College acquisition by Northeastern University. Speaking of Gatsby, here's some inspiration from the foreword of this wonderful little recipe book. About 2 years ago, a friend said, "We are living in a sandwich, salad, and dessert age." After thinking of the great mechanical, electrical, and chemical developments in the past 5 years, of the office girls and boys who rush to their work, to their lunches, to picnics, bridge parties, dances, and whatnot, of the mother who rushes her children off to school, where they do not give children time to go home for meals, of the sandwich shops and drugstores, which has usurped the place of old-time restaurant and dining rooms, in short, modern America, I say truly you are right. We are living in a sandwich, salad, and dessert age. Best name ever, Octalise Stephen Timlin. Now we have another name for the jazz age. Enchanting gossamer in an aspect gel disguises sturdy cabbage and carrots in a tempting salad mold. Now, ladies of a certain age know that collagen protein is a must. The secret ingredient of the day was indeed gelatin, usually unflavored, or lemon. Gelling with a J had in earlier times been the signature food treatment of the very rich who could afford the servants' time to prepare gelatin from scratch, from calves' feet and or deer antlers. Jell-O hit the market in the early 1900s, and sales grew as refrigerators entered more and more homes. Deco housewives discovered that any fruit or vegetable became more attractive when suspended in sparkling gelatin. Just look at these recipes. Molded peach salad, crab meat in cucumber jelly, yum. Perfection salad was very popular. Cabbage, celery, olives, sweet sour flavor with unflavored gelatin. Tomato aspic, I've seen many of those get Gatsby. Ginger ale salad, how easy could that be? Jellied pear salad, this was a classic. Mix cream cheese with chopped stuffed olives, stuff into the cavity of canned pear halves, garnish with pimento, cover in individual molds with lemon gelatin, churn out on lettuce, and serve with cream dressing. Here's a clipping that's famous among my Deco friends. This is Teresa LaQuay's signature luncheon loaf. Here it is as served at Laurie Gordon's wedding shower. Basically, you take a loaf of white bread, cut off the crust, slice it horizontally, and build a 4-layered sandwich, which you then frost with cream cheese. And when you slice it, it's absolute magic. As if by magic, a stuffed tomato with spooned petals of cream cheese becomes a rose. Lovely to look at, delightful to eat. Especially if you love and adore cream cheese. That's just a lot of cream cheese to coat the tongue, though. But, cream cheese was very, very, very popular. Peeled melon filled with tomato aspic, and frosted with cream cheese. There's a Gatsby winner. This one's from the American Women's Cookbook. It's a classic. So, with this one, you basically need cream cheese or cottage cheese, which I prefer, lettuce leaves, and French dressing. Not plucked from an Italian vineyard, but fashioned with pear, frosted with cream cheese, and studded with half grapes for individual salads at formal occasions. Let's look at more curious salads, shall we? So for modern Priscilla, stuffed prune salad is also called Algonquin salad. From Meta Given, sardines were very, very big. And from American Women, Moving on to soups. Wonderful soups. Glorious soups. Any vintage cookbook is a great source for simple and hearty traditional soups. One kind you just don't see anymore, again, gets mixed up with appetizers and salads. Soups hot and thick or jellied consommé are doubly delicious when beautifully served. So, jellied consommé, this is like a protein bomb here. Soup stock, gelatin, cold water. And remember, you have to soften the gelatin in the cold water before you add it to the hot boiling soup. I love this. The trays of the mechanical refrigerator are excellent for chilling soups. Did you know that? Another Victorian era favorite was mock turtle soup. The only Deco Era recipe I could find, however, was this one. Mockery of all other things was definitely in vogue. Modern Priscilla's mock duck, by the way, is made of flank steak, which brings us to our main course. The National Livestock Board made great strides in this era as meat became less of a flavoring and more of a must-have main dish. Pick up a vintage cookbook next time you want comfort food like brisket, fricassee, roasts. Beef a la mode, I'm sure, is served with a scoop of vanilla ice cream, and larded grouse, another perennial favorite. This being the sandwich, salad, and dessert age, hamburgers were becoming pop culture food, fast food yet. Best known as Wimpy's favorite snack in Popeye. Recipes for hamburgers were sparse in World War II cookbooks due to a suspicion of all things German. Salisbury steak was the clever substitute and euphemism. I apologize, we have a vegetarian trigger warning for the next few slides. America's budding love affair with meat was evident in pamphlets of the era. Make the most of your meat. The merits of pure lard, I think this might be by Immanuel Kant, and my favorite, Meat and Romance, in which Peggy, the young bride, learns from her butcher, if you ask for an unpopular cut of meat, you'll save a bundle. How romantic is that? The subtext here is, use every part of the animal. That's an indigenous tradition that is thankfully coming back for the brave and the hipsters. Meta Given has some lovely euphemisms for organ meats. Widely consumed, there are recipes for them in every cookbook. I'm ashamed to admit I've never fed liver and onions to my own son, even though I loved them as a child. Today, we're too worried about the pesticides that collect in these quote-unquote meat sundries. Some of these sound like a horror movie. This recipe is interesting, if only because chop suey is one of the few foods you'll commonly find in these cookbooks. The other is chicken curry. According to Modern Priscilla, tripe is the inner lining of the stomach of the beef creature. I love that so much. Beef creatures. In addition to every part of the animal, they used every animal. The days were disappearing when Americans could easily go out and hunt and trap their own food. Choose rabbits with soft ears and paws, says Meta Given in the Modern Family Cookbook 1942, but she's not talking about a trip to the pet store. Stiffness is a sign of age. A troubling statement like this makes you realize how our generation was brought up to be squeamish about the bodies of things we eat. Reindeer, which the government was breeding at the time. Okay, if you're not totally grossed out yet, I'll tell you how to make larded grouse. Larding was the process of sewing strips of salt pork or other fat through the skin of a drier meat or fish with an actual larding needle. You can still buy them. Okay, vegetarians, you can open your eyes again. This next section is for you. There are great recipes to be found in all general cookbooks of the vintage era due to rationing traditions and Judeo-Christian Sabbath observation. Now, who needs tofurkey when you've got recipes like nut loaf, baked bean roast, baked eggs in tomato cups? Yum. Rarebit, I make that every Easter. It's pronounced rabbit. For a minute there, Trader Joe's was even carrying field roast. As you can see, the general loathing for vegetables had begun. But fortunately, there were many curious vegetables. Here's cooked carrots rolled in breadcrumbs and baked, and here's a new presentation of peas in a carrot ring. Now, if your thrifty hostess or mother served you a potluck or cocktail, then you would certainly never be surprised about leftovers. Every book has a section on made-over dishes by any name. With creative recycling, leftovers were not only a part of life, they were an absolute art form of the era. First, a Deco housewife would pulverize her leftovers. But remember, she had no Cuisinart, and blenders were still new enough for everyone not to have one. This woman had muscles. She used egg beaters, mashers, and sometimes even a wooden spoon and a sieve. Yes, they would press their ground meat through a sieve. It was called force meat. Most kitchens had a meat grinder in it. Check out this labor-saving device, a gas-powered meat grinder, huh? Force meat, which was cooked or uncooked meat that was turned into a sort of smooth dough, could be molded into all sorts of appealing shapes and served in delightful ways. Croquettes were deep-fried, creamed, or mashed anything. Bouchées, or pastry shells filled with creamed or mashed anything. Fritters, creamed or mashed anything shaped into pancakes and fried. Cutlets, creamed or mashed anything shaped into the form of the meat it was originally. And timbales, any starch or vegetable pre-baked or deep-fried in the shape of a cup to hold creamed, say it with me, or mashed anything. Jokes with hollandaise sauce are works of art. Yeah, delicious then and delicious now. Tender green asparagus with golden cheese sauce looks good enough to eat, and is! Creaming, which could mean many things, from actual cream to condensed milk to white sauce made with butter and white flour, was a must-have skill, but it was also an art. Creaming is transformational. Creamed chicken on toast becomes chicken a la king. Creamed cheese and egg on toast becomes Welsh rabbit. Or rarebit. But rabbit if it's Easter. Speaking of eating healthy, our love affair with refined sugar was well underway. Cooks of the era put the same care and fuss into dessert items that they did into appetizers and vegetables, continuing traditions of many famous sweet treats. I do love this quote. Dessert should be considered an integral part of the meal, not something tacked on to a meal already complete as to food value. You can find recipes for every kind of sweet you would ever want in a vintage cookbook. A glamorous cream-filled torte comes forth in a blaze of glory to shed its radiance on your anniversary or junior's birthday. Gay little plum puddings to spread holiday spirits and cheer. Desserts for the family were sometimes even nutritious, and the enjoyment of fresh fruit was encouraged. Use the pastry tube for meringues and gay little cakes for gala occasions. For that clever touch, cookie cutouts to match the mood of your party. Have you noticed that it was important for desserts to be gay? Now, in preparation of dessert, I believe we find the seeds of destruction for the era of the Deco housewife. A big part of kitchen culture was the practice of sifting. Many dessert recipes start like this. Sift, flour, measure, re-sift 3 times with the next 2 ingredients. When you have a crank sifter, this is daydreamy work. But one day, a clever designer invented the one-handed sifter to save time, which presumably changed the entire experience. This small design change may have single-handedly, pun intended, driven women out of the kitchen for good. In 1960, Peg Bracken brought in a new era with her best-selling I Hate to Cookbook, which acknowledged the oppression many women felt trying to carry on the enthusiastic creativity of their mothers of the Depression era. Granddaughters of the flappers went on to burn their bras, and history moved on. But today we can still be inspired by the spirit of these enthusiastic, lipsticked women whenever we whip up a perfection salad or experiment with jellied soup. This brings us to the end of our meal, and as the flavors linger on, I'd like to invite you to take the values and spirit of Deco dining into the 21st century. Meta Given provided more than menus. She provided pledges of philosophy for the meal planners, food shoppers, and cooks who read her books, whether they were the same person or employees of the housewife. Let us digest this lovely meal by reciting the Cook's Creed together. Please raise your right hand and read along. The health of my family is in my care. Therefore, I will preserve as far as possible the nutritive elements in the foods which are delivered to me. My family's enjoyment of food is in my care, therefore, I will preserve and enhance the attractive qualities of the foods with which I work. Stretching the food dollar is part of my responsibility. Therefore, I will take such care of foods that none will spoil. I will use leftovers with thought and skill.
A well-prepared dish
and an appetizing meal are a creative achievement. Therefore, I shall derive happiness from work itself. Good food is of prime importance to my family.
I shall take pride in doing an
Therefore,
outstanding job
I
of
shall take
cooking.
pride in
I
doing
shall
an
take pride in
outstanding job
doing
of
an
cooking.
outstanding job
Right on.
of cooking.